Want an easy, simple idea for slow stitching without creating a collage? Try stitching on upholstery samples, calling all fans of crafting with recycled materials. This is a sustainable way to craft and stitch. Join me as I take a square of recycled upholstery and use simple stitches to outline the patterns. See how you can use color to add contrast or to simply add beautiful texture, and how to use a template to add a bird or any shape you like to enhance and personalize your stitching. If you don't have access to samples, no worries. You can use any type of fabric that has a bold pattern to create similar effects. So join me and create your own slow stitching piece inspired by designs in your fabric. Come and stitch along. So here's what I've started with. I've added some simple stitching to this piece of fabric, and I've added a bird. I'm stitching on an upholstery sample. So here is this book of samples that I got, and they're sized about 10 by 10. There's several different designs, sometimes the same design in more than one color, and there's lots of variety. Some have really plain designs, and some have really intricate, beautiful designs. And this one has lots of metallics. Now, I got this at a place called Fab Cycle that specializes in Deadstock fabrics. They ship to Canada and the United States. And these types of businesses are cropping up everywhere. And so depending on where you're located, there may be a place near you that specializes in recycled and Deadstock fabrics. But if you don't have access to any kind of recycled, upcycled fabric or a place where you can get upholstery samples, you can still do this type of stitching on any fabric that has a nice, bold pattern. Here are some silk examples. Now this piece has really bright colors and these bold flowers. So there's lots of places that I could trace the design and add stitching. This piece also has the bright colors, but a very different design. And there's lots of opportunities to add stitch here. And then this piece is different again. It has this geometric pattern going across it. So you really can do this on any type of fabric. And particularly if you have a fabric that has a really large design on it. You can just take a small square and use the inspiration that's in the fabric to guide where you're going to stitch. So for my piece, I've begun outlining the flowers and the stems with running stitches. So this is really simple. I'm just following the design that's there. I'm tracing around it. It's really relaxing. Now you can also add a shape on top of these fabrics. You can really add any shape that you like. So here I've added a bird, and I'm using tracing templates. So this bird is from my set of 6 tracing templates. And I've simply placed it on fabric and traced around it and cut it out. And I'll put a link in description if you want to have a look at this set. So I have another piece of this upholstery fabric, and I had some other ideas of shapes that might work really well here. So I've pulled out this teacup, and I'm going to audition it by just moving it around on top of this piece. And you can see how nice that looks. I could choose a matching or contrasting color, darker or lighter. There's so many options of what you could choose to trace this shape onto and decide where you want to place it. This is from my set of 4 different types of teacups and a spoon. So I could really use any of these. They'd look great here. The other idea I had was to add a butterfly. So here's my butterfly template. You can see on this same piece of fabric, there's a couple of spots where it would look really nice. And this is from a set that has a butterfly and a fish and a few different types of birds, including a penguin and a chicken. So adding a shape on top of this type of fabric is a really nice way to personalize it and make it your own. I'm going to show now some of the different types of upholstery samples that I've been able to find. This one's quite a bit smaller, and it's got these really nice bright colors. And there's a bunch of different types of fabrics in here. I've got some beautiful texture on them. These are going to make really nice backgrounds for stitching. And I have this other large one, and this one's really a mix. You see you've got some quilted fabric there that's really plain, and that's going to be a beautiful background. And there's a real variety of designs here. Now, some of these books have smaller pieces in them as well that are half the size. So that's a really nice variety. And in this set, there also happens to be some pieces that are velvet. So that's a real bonus as well. And then there's some tartan in there. So there's a real variety. And every time that you go to look for these, they're going to have something different. So now back to the piece I'm working on. I'm going to talk about the needles and threads that I'm using. So the stitching I've done so far, I've been using pearl cotton size 8. It's a beautiful twisted thread, and it comes in so many colors. So far I've only chosen these two colors, this pale turquoise color and this orange that's just slightly darker than the copper shades that are found in the fabric. And to stitch with the pearl cotton size 8, I like to use a chenille needle size 24, and you can also use a long darner or a milliner's needle number 1. So any of those will work really well with this type of stitching. So the other type of thread that I've used, stitching here to attach my bird, is hand quilting thread. This one is by Coates and Clark. It's a very strong thread, and the color in this black matches really closely to this very, very dark blue that I've chosen for the bird. So when you're stitching like this, you can choose to add a batting or a base or not. Now the stitching that I've begun here, I haven't put anything on the back. I'm just stitching into the fabric, and that's because it's a thicker, heavier fabric because it's upholstery, so it doesn't really need any kind of backing. It's strong enough to hold up to the stitching that I'm doing. And so I may want to add some type of batting or felt at some point. And the reason I would do that is because it would puff up my stitches more and it would give me more texture. But so far, I haven't added anything. I'm able to just add those running stitches, tracing the shapes without anything behind it. Another thing that's good to do when you're choosing a thread color to stitch is to unravel some of the thread and just take the one strand, hold it across your piece to see if you feel like the color is going to work. So here I'm putting these two threads across my darkest color and across the lighter areas. And I can see that I'm going to have different effects, but the colors and the shades I think I really like. And the reason that I do this is because it's similar to when you're choosing paint to paint on a wall and you have those small paint chips. They don't really give you an idea of what it's going to look like on the wall that's so much bigger than the paint chip. And these spools of thread, the color's really concentrated. So pulling out a strand can give you a better idea of the effects that you're going to get with stitching. So I'm going to stitch some more on this piece, relax, and see where it takes me. So here I've added more stitch to my piece. I have more color and more texture going on. So adding to these two colors I started with, in this pale turquoise and the bright orange, I brought in a golden yellow and I brought in a darker blue. And because my bird is actually a dark blue instead of a black, I thought it would be nice to include a dark blue rather than a black. And when you look at these four colors that I've chosen, you can see that none of them match exactly the colors that are going on in my fabric. But they all match with the fabric. So the orange and the yellow are darker and lighter than my copper tones. And my light turquoise blue is slightly different than the silver. Now I've brought in one other color, and this thread is variegated very subtly. This is a sulky thread. It's cotton and it's 12 weight. And I've started to do some running stitches in the background. And because this 12 weight thread is thinner than the Pearl Cotton size 8, I've doubled the thread. And I've just begun adding some running stitches for texture. Now, if you're interested in the running stitch and how that can really add interesting texture to your piece, I'm going to link to another video where I talk about 3 different ways to use the running stitch and the different effects you can get. It's such a versatile stitch, and it really, really adds beautiful, beautiful texture. So now I'm going to continue stitching. You can see I've added more running stitch so far, and I've also added blanket stitch around the edges. So I want to lean into those 2 things, continuing with these running stitches, and I'm going to even add more on my border. So I've done some more stitching, I've done more outlining, and more stitch in the background. Some of my stitching is really visible and some of it is subtle. The other thing I've done at the border is I've added some couching. I've taken some dark blue yarn and I've couched it all the way around on the edges. Now, if you want to see how I do that, I'm going to link to another video. And in this video, I show how to do the spiral slow stitch. And near the end of the video, I show how I attach this blue cording all around the edges using the blanket stitch. And that's the same process that I used here to attach this dark blue yarn. And this is thinner than that red cording in the other video, but it's added a beautiful unified border. So you can see the different areas where I've added stitching. I've used seed stitch, and I've added more running stitch. Very, very simple stitching and very, very relaxing. I'm going to pick this piece up and move it around so you can see how much texture's been added with the stitching. And as I move it around, you can see how those metallic threads catch the light, but you can also see that texture from all the stitching. And you can see that beautiful puffiness that I mentioned. And that's because I decided on the back to add a layer of felt. Again, it wasn't necessary, but I really like how it added that extra 3D dimension to the piece. The other thing that you might notice looking at it is that I've left some areas unstitched. So this is something that you might want to consider when you're stitching, is to have some small areas where you've added very little or even no stitching at all. It's completely up to you and it depends on the effect that you're going for, but sometimes it's nice to have that space for your eye to rest. So I'm going to leave the areas that I haven't stitched just like they are. So bringing back in all the colors that I've used to stitch on this piece, you can really see just by adding the running stitch, a few French knots, and some seed stitch has really changed the way that this piece looks. It's personalized it. Now, one of the other things that I did is I took some of the areas where I added running stitch and I whipped them. Can see particularly right here near the top on this one leaf where I used 2 colors, the gold and the dark blue, and I whipped the blue stitches with the gold. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So over on the left here, there's 2 leaves coming off of this stem, and I've traced them with the running stitch in that gold color. And now I'm going to come in with the bright orange and I'm going to whip those stitches. So I come up beside one of the stitches and then I'm just going to go underneath that stitch to wrap this orange thread around it. Now you can go in using the sharp side of your needle and pull it through, or you can turn your needle around and use the eye of the needle to pull it through that stitch. Either way works. So I take my needle and I push it underneath that stitch and I pull up, And then I move to the next stitch and I push the needle under that stitch, pull it up, and it creates this beautiful wrapping texture. And I just continue moving my way around, wrapping each stitch as I go, and it connects to the next. And it creates this beautiful two-toned effect. Now these colors are very similar, so that's going to give a different effect than when you use two colors that are very different, like I did on the leaf near the top. So I've traced this leaf here, and I really like the way that that looks, so I'm going to do the same thing for that leaf that's a little higher up. So now I've traced both of these leaves. You can see how it's changed the color and the way that it's looking. It's not exactly orange or gold, it's a nice mix of the two colors. You can get some really beautiful effects just by whipping the stitches. So some other areas where it might be nice to whip the stitches are areas where I've traced all the way around the outside of the flower petals. I've used one color to do this, so it would be really easy to pick another color and just continue that outline pattern by whipping around them. And it would make a much thicker, darker line, much like with that leaf near the top. It really would depend on what color you chose, the kind of effect that you'd get. So I hope this has given you some ideas and inspiration about ways that you can slow stitch without creating a collage and just working on one piece of fabric. If you're able to get upholstery samples, they're a beautiful option for stitching. But remember, you can also use any type of fabric that you have that has a nice, bold pattern. And with fabric, I'd place felt or batting behind it. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, happy stitching.